What is up, guys? In this video, I'm going to be talking about players that I'm pretty nervous about, guys that really haven't been performing up to what we thought they would be, that are really performing below ADP, and guys that I don't know if there's like really positive outlook on them rest of season. And this list starts with a guy that I'm very sad to say is Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is still a great running back. He's still very capable, but the Titans are so horrifically, stupendously, impressively bad. They have one of the worst offensive lines that I might have ever seen. He's getting tackled behind the line. I think in the first half of yesterday's game, he had like 4 carries for -7 yards or something. Like, first of all, he's not getting enough work. Second of all, the offensive line's not getting any movement or any type of leverage. So Derrick Henry, man, if they're in a negative game script, he's only playing like 30-40% of snaps, which is really bad, right? Like, you drafted this guy in the first 2 rounds, most likely, and he's performing like a 6th, 7th round, like 0 RB pick. And that's really brutal, especially for someone like me who had Derrick Henry. Dude, I just want to show you guys my lineup. Um, it's fucking brutal, dude. I had Derrick Henry, Josh Kelly, Drake London, and Dalton Kincaid yesterday, basically in the morning games. All of them combined for like 7 points. What is that? 9 points, dude. I had 9 points from 4 players. Absolutely brutal. It's one of the worst fantasy matchups, one of the worst performances I've ever seen. But anyway, back to Derrick Henry. He is very nervous for me, especially considering the fact that they play Cincinnati, who should be a slightly better matchup, but then Indianapolis and Baltimore, both of which are very stout run defenses. Baltimore, maybe not as much as we thought after they just got carved up by Zach Moss. But I'm very nervous about Derrick Henry. I think that they might trade him, and which would propel Tajay Spears into a lead role and might help Derrick Henry recoup some of his value if he goes to a team that is very running back needy. So we're kind of hoping and praying that Derrick Henry does get traded, because at the moment, Tannehill, this offensive line, the Titans just don't look very good. So I'd be very nervous. I'd be looking. The problem is that you can't really move him for anyone. Like, who would really take Derrick Henry at cost right now? You'd essentially be selling him at his absolute lowest, probably the lowest value Derrick Henry has ever had in his career, which is to be expected, right? He's 29. He's on a bad team. He's got a lot of mileage on his engine. It's brutal. And the next guy on the list is going to be Drake London. Now, Drake London, somebody I personally never should have drafted to begin with. He's another guy that I had on my team yesterday. Week one, obviously got the one target, played a lot of snaps, but got one target. The Falcons didn't really throw the ball very much that game. Week two, he was much more needed as they were losing, and they ended up throwing the ball, and he ended up producing. He went, 6 for 67 and a touchdown. And yesterday, they had a very similar game script to the game that they had against the Packers, where they had to come back, which ended up coming back and winning. But they couldn't pull it off against the Lions, and they didn't really seem very interested in throwing the ball. Like, even though they were down, they really weren't pushing the ball downfield. They were still running the ball on like first and second down, and they're getting caught in these third and longs. It was absolutely confusing. It was frustrating. I don't know what to do with Drake London now. Nobody really wants him. After week one, his value is essentially plummeted to 0. He could pop up for the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, and it won't matter, because that sting, that sour taste, that anticipation of week one is just going to be on everybody's mind. So you can really, I would try to package him with like a stout running back to try to upgrade at wide receiver and then downgrade at running back or something like that. But for the most part, I don't know if you're going to be able to move him. You're kind of stuck with him. When you start him, he will do nothing. And when you sit him, he will pop off like he probably did for a lot of people in week two. And yeah, absolutely brutal. I just don't really know. Next on the list is Najee Harris. Watch the highlights. Basically, he's losing his job. He didn't look so bad. There were a couple plays where he had some juice. He had like a couple of nice spin moves, got some nice like yards after contact. But for the most part, he's losing his job. Like, as much as you might love Najee Harris, at the end of the day, if he's not going to have the lead workhorse role, which is really where most of his value comes from, you're not going to be happy with him, right? 4 points, 4 points, 6 points. Najee Harris is probably one of the bigger busts, in the draft, because at least other guys have given you something, right, in the first like 2 or 3 rounds. So next guy on the list is going to be Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields, the experiment is over. Justin Fields is who we thought he was. He is a glorified. I mean, he's a bad running back, right? He's a bad running back and a worse quarterback. All the people who think he's an absolute dynamic athlete, give me any running back in the league over him. And if he can't throw the ball on top of it, I just don't see how this could possibly work. I don't see how Justin Fields will have any value moving forward. I will say one thing, though. I'll preface by saying this. They had some tough matchups. Not Green Bay, but Tampa Bay and Kansas City are two of the better defenses. Um, Tampa Bay's rush defense is one of the best in the last like 10 plus years. You know, Vita Vea has been just a stalwart. And anytime Vita Vea is in the game, I just sit any of my running backs, and that includes rushing quarterbacks, right? So Justin Fields experiment, I don't know. Going forward, he does see Detroit, which is could be a get right game, followed by Washington, who has a stout defense up front. So it's brutal. And then you have kind of like a little bit of a cakewalk with Minnesota, Vegas, and the Chargers. But I don't know, man. I don't know what I'd be doing. I would be trying to package him to upgrade at quarterback and downgrade at a position that you're strong in. Because at the moment, if you're trying to win in fantasy, you need consistency, right? And if he's a guy who's not gonna be able to perform against strong defenses, it's not gonna be fun come playoff time, right? Now, week 15, which is the first week of the playoffs, if you have Justin Fields, you're probably not going to get a bye. I could be wrong, but you're going to see Cleveland, who has probably the number one defense in the league this year. So I don't know if that's what you want to see week 1. If you can make it to week 16 and 17, it loosens up a little bit. You know, Atlanta is not no slouch this year, but I'm very nervous about Justin Fields. And moving on to Breece Hall. Now, Breece Hall, phenomenal talent. Week 1, had such a small snap share, such small opportunity, but popped off into very strong performance. 10 for 127. But week 2 against Dallas, understandable. A lot of people were writing that off as saying, "Hey, that's just the Cowboys' defense." But James Conner definitely just popped off against the Cowboys' defense. So it makes me nervous that it's the Jets, right? It's the Jets. It's the offensive line. It's the incapability of Zach Wilson. I just don't see Breece Hall having consistent production, right? I see him struggling against Kansas City this week. I see him potentially popping off against Denver, and then I see him struggling against Philadelphia. And then you go into a bye, and by then you're 1-6 or 1-4, 1-5, whatever it is. Like, that's rough, man. And that's somebody that I'm not very confident in the Jets offense. I don't know how they turn it around unless they trade for a veteran. But from a schedule point of view, it's also very rough. They're in a division that's very hard. They got the Patriots in their division, they got Buffalo, and they've got Miami, who are like either Miami is good on offense, okay on defense. Patriots a great defense. They'll usually take away your best players, usually accentuate your weaknesses. So I'm very nervous about Breece Hall. Moving on, Jahan Dotson. The Jahan Dotson prayer hype is over. 3 straight weeks, sub 7 points in half PPR. Aside from week 1, where he showed some glimmers of hope, where he went 5 for 40, he has just been uninvolved, uninspiring. He hasn't been getting a lot of good separation. Statistically, he's not doing that bad. Like, he's still pretty effective as like a, from a PFF point of view. But I'm nervous, man. I'm nervous because the Commanders are liable to getting shut out and blown out. So you would think that in a negative game script, someone like Dotson could be effective, right? I mean, they were losing to Buffalo the entire game, yet he still couldn't get any like garbage time production. So I don't know. You can't sell any of these guys, right? They're playing Philadelphia next week. Now, does that mean Slay is going to be on McLaurin? Probably not. Dude, probably not, because Slay usually plays on the outside. I imagine Slay would be sticking to Jahan Dotson, which that's 4 weeks in a row of potentially bad production. He's going to have no value after that. If you could potentially trade him now until his value tanks even further, I would go for it. But somebody that I'm very nervous about, man. Very nervous about. I was so big on him. I was so hype on Jahan Dotson. He was like one of my sleeper targets, targeting him everywhere. Even when he was going to like the 6th round, I was still like down. I still thought that was value. And the last guy on my list is Javonte Williams. This one is a little bit mercurial. This one's a little bit dubious because Javonte Williams has been getting opportunity, right? He's been getting no less than 11 carries at a decent clip of close to 4 yards per carry. He's getting a couple of targets per game. Week 1 got 6 targets. it was looking good. It was looking like he could be a part of a strong Sean Payton led offense, which we know that can yield a lot of production for running backs, but it's just not coming together on the field, man. Now we have a battle of the mid-offs. We have a mid-off, a battle of the bastards, Chicago versus the Broncos this week. This could be a get right game for almost everyone. This could be Javonte popping off, Russell Wilson popping off, Justin Fields popping off, and somebody's got to win that game, right? You got 2 0-3 teams. Somebody's bound to win. I think both teams are destined for the draft lottery, but you never know, man. I think if I had to give the edge to someone, it'd be the Broncos. I think the Broncos haven't actually looked so bad. And that's crazy to say that after they just lost 70-20. But in the other games that they played, they weren't horrible, right? Russ was still getting the ball downfield. I think Marvin Mims really opens up the offense. Courtland Sutton's been productive. I think Javonte Williams can be a little bit better, but I am very nervous. I'm very nervous that this Broncos offense will just be decrepit all year. And then you're left with a guy who you can't really bench and you're not really confident starting, right? So those are guys that I'm nervous about, man, after Sunday's games. Not the best hard-hitting advice, but these are guys that I'm nervous about and that I don't think you can trade. And, the only guy on this list that I would still start simply because you have to is probably Derrick Henry and maybe Justin Fields, just because the upside. Like going back to Justin Fields, his floor, right? Like he's been no less than, 15, 16, and then 11 fantasy points. But that's a pretty decent floor considering how bad the game yesterday went against Kansas City. The fact that he still got you 11 points, like when a pocket passer gets shut out, they get you like 1 point. They get you like 2 points, right? So the fact that he still gets you 11 in a shutout, it's not horrible. It's not the end of the world. But yeah, those are the only 2 guys on this list that I would still feel like I would have to start simply because of how you would think that talent would win out. But the rest of the guys, I would not be starting them. But anyway, guys, I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope you guys enjoy this one. If you do, give it a like. Give me a subscribe, man. We're growing a little. We're growing slowly. Hit me in the comments. Let me know if you have any sit-start questions or trade advice or, drops. If you want to drop someone, let me know who it is, and I'll try to help you guys. Peace.